Hey everyone, welcome back to Christmas in July on Every Version Ever. My name is Jonathan North, and today we're looking at a whole bunch of Hallmark Lifetime-esque TV movie adaptations of A Christmas Carol, all of them featuring gender-swapped Scrooge characters. This episode ended up being even bigger than I thought because I had originally planned for it to cover just movies I had previously reviewed with Rachel Wagner. Rachel is the founder of the Hallmark-esque podcast, and as such, she's kind of an expert in Christmas movies, especially of the television film variety. Over the years, Rachel has introduced me to a whole bunch of Hallmark and Lifetime films and other movies in that same vein, and we've talked about 4 different TV movie versions of A Christmas Carol, each one featuring a female Scrooge or Scrooge-like character. During the first year of my YouTube channel, we did a video on a movie called A Diva's Christmas Carol, starring Vanessa Williams as a singer named Ebony Scrooge. It was actually a rather entertaining adaptation, and I enjoyed the clever twist they put on the story. And then last year, Rachel and I did an episode of my other podcast, I Heart Movies, and we covered 3 more female Scrooges in films called Ebby, Every Day is Christmas, and It's Christmas Carol, each one building off the Christmas Carol framework, but in completely different ways. My plan for this episode originally was to combine the original review of A Diva's Christmas Carol with last year's podcast and make one big episode out of it, until I started editing, and I realized there was one more female Hallmark Scrooge out there that I had somehow missed. So at the last minute, I found a copy, got a hold of Rachel, and we recorded one more review. And that final film is from 2003, and it's called A Carol Christmas, another Christmas Carol film featuring a woman literally named Carol, except this one is played by Tori Spelling. So all in all, we are now talking about 5 different films for this episode. So if you're a fan of Christmas Carol, and you're a fan of Hallmark movies, or TV films, or cable rom-coms, then take notes, because you're definitely going to want to check out some of these films we're talking about today. I have to say, this is probably one of the most unique versions I've ever seen.
Yeah. I have a podcast where I watch Hallmark movies. I am sort of an aficionado of TV movies, particularly Christmas movies. And there are 3 pretty solid, entertaining Christmas Carol adaptations that have been on the various channels. This one, The Diva's Christmas Carol with Vanessa Williams, that was on VH1 originally, and then there's It's Christmas Carol that has Carrie Fisher in it. That's really fun, and that was on Hallmark Channel. And then you have, I can't remember what it's called, with Tori Spelling, and I actually like all 3. I think they're all 3 enjoyable. They're not like feature film worthy, but I think they all are fun, in my opinion. And so, but this one is probably the best out of those 3. And it makes some interesting choices, and I think it has some funny parts, it has some scary parts. It's just an enjoyable film, in my opinion. Basically, the setup of this version of Christmas Carol is, like I said, starring Vanessa Williams, and she plays this singer, this celebrity named Ebony, and she is really like cold and like bitter and wants everything to be perfect, and is making all of her staff work all these crazy hours. She has this niece that she never sees and is kind of rude to. So she's just a jerk, like Scrooge should be. And so it sort of sets it up. How did you like the setup of Ebony and her character?
When you first open the movie, it's like she seems like a really nice person. She's singing this really great holiday song, and then it turns out that this is actually for a show, and she's not like who she seems to be at all. She's this awful person who is screaming at all of her assistants, and she makes the one guy start crying, which for some reason I found it really funny.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is funny. I agree.
Yeah, so she's just a horrible person, and I really liked how they set that up. But yeah. Vanessa Williams, she is so good. I loved her back when she was on the show Ugly Betty. A very kind of a similar character. She's just great at playing absolutely awful people. People that you love to hate.
So they have Jacob Marley, the figure, is a former band mate of Ebony. She was part of a trio originally, and her name is Marley, Marli. And she is Chili from the band TLC. And I thought at least her like costume was kind of clever, the way that they had the chains kind of on as part of her costume. As part of, I thought it was sort of clever the way they did the chain. And you learn that she was pretty awful to these bandmates. And so our Christmas past is Kathy Griffin. And I thought she was pretty funny. I thought. I'm not like the biggest fan of hers, but I thought the dialogue was pretty funny.
Yeah, Kathy Griffin has become sort of a controversial figure in recent years, but I don't think she's been in so many things, never as like a main character, but I don't think I've ever seen anything with her that I didn't like. She's really good at playing small character roles and really hamming it up in the best way possible. So I really liked her character in this version.
Yeah. Like there's some good lines like when she's complimented on her dress and she says, well, last year I had to show Tom Ford all of his Christmases. That was funny. There's the shadows of the people or whatever, and she tells Ebony, these aren't real people. It's like Los Angeles. I don't know. She was just funny, but it was pretty. I thought pretty intense. They go to some dark places with her backstory. I mean, at least I thought like the scene with her father just like berating, them and like being horrible, and her becoming this foster child, and
it got a lot darker than I expected it to with her backstory. I'm glad that it was Kathy Griffin being the one to take her around. I don't think I would have liked this if it was the Ghost of Christmas Present taking her around. It kind of needed her to be a little bit of light in her dark backstory, I guess.
Yeah, and you also see that what she did to her band and how she basically bailed on them right as they were kind of getting famous, and there's some pretty, I think, decent songs in this.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how much I liked the songs.
And you also get a look at her former bandmate, who is just in a horrible situation. I guess she had gotten to a point where she'd actually sued Ebony for the way that she left or whatever, and for their songs and stuff. And
I took it as the other way around. I took it that Ebony had sued her, and that's why she was in such a bad place.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood that. But yeah, there was bad blood between them, and it originated from the way that Ebony had left and just kind of left her in the lurch, and she didn't have any of her songs. So there's sort of that plot element as well. So then we get to present, and this is a actor named John Taylor, and he's like a hard rocker. she opens her room, and her, like they always do with Present, and instead of like being feast or whatever, it's like her whole suite is like completely trashed.
Yeah, I didn't really care for him as much.
Yeah, I can see that. He's kind of like a Russell Brand kind of type character.
I feel like they should have worked a little harder to make him more likable. I didn't think he was very likable.
Yeah, that's true.
I kind of expected, because like the Ghost of Christmas Present is supposed to be the jolly one, the happy one, and you got a lot more happiness out of Kathy Griffin in the past than this hard rocker drunk guy in the present.
Yeah, I can see that. I think they were going for like a rock and roll kind of version of like partying and happiness kind of thing. But yeah, I can see. I agree. He isn't strong. He isn't a great character, and he is kind of annoying. But I like just sort of the idea of it being a sort of rock and roll version. But you basically see in Present, you see her crew complaining and getting upset. You see Bob, the Cratchit character, who had dated Ebony, had been in love with her, and we do find out some of that in past, but he now is married to this other woman, and they have a son who is in very poor health named Tim, and he needs to spend more time with him because it's very touch and go, and she basically threatens to fire him if he goes and spends time with his son. He's like, screw you, I don't care, I'm going to spend time with my son. And what did you think of that?
I liked their dynamic together. I didn't really care for his family, and I know that's terrible to say about a sick child, but he was not a good actor, and I didn't like him.
Yeah, TV movies, kid actors can be not the greatest. But I thought there is some nice heart, I think, between, and the idea of sort of Cratchit and the Scrooge character being in love with each other at one point. That's sort of an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I like that twist. I liked that they had a past like that.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that I liked how his wife was handling it, because it seemed like she was jealous, and I didn't really care for that. I wanted her to be more likable, but I guess I get it. I was a bit annoyed with her as well.
Well, I mean, I can understand, because like if you were stressed out about your child being sick and maybe dying, and your husband was being kept on the road away from your family, like I think I would probably be pretty like her. But I can see what you mean. She's not the greatest actress or the greatest role, but anyway, it's interesting. I mean, it would have been really easy for them to make him like a single dad or something like that, so they could like reunite at the end. So I thought that was kind of an interesting choice that they
I feel
made.
like that would have been the easy way out. I kind of
Yeah.
liked that they didn't end up together, because that happens all the time. Like, you have these two
Yeah.
characters who were in love in the past, and then at the end they somehow get back together. I liked that he did not do that. I liked that he stayed with his wife and family, even though I didn't really care for his wife and child. For the purpose of the story, I liked that he stayed with them, and it would have been too easy for him to end up back with Ebony.
So then we get to future, and I think this is the best part of this movie. It was very clever, I think, to do this behind the music thing, because it's on VH1, and
Mm-hmm.
the idea of like her sitting down watching like the behind the music of Ebony, and these interviews, and how she was this egomaniac, and how she went down this the slide of shame and whatever. I think that was very clever, very smart, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great twist to the normal version of how you see the Ghost of Christmas Future. That's
Yeah.
not something I'd ever seen before or would have even thought of doing. I really liked that they did it that way.
Yeah, it's really good. And then of course she has her sort of reckoning or whatever, and she realizes that she needs to change. And so she makes everything right in the end, as always they do. I just really I enjoy it. It's maybe kind of a guilty pleasure, but I have no guilt. Yeah, I mean, I know it's not like a great movie, but I think it's entertaining. I like it.
Yeah, I can see why you could call it a guilty pleasure. I don't really like the term guilty pleasure, because I think you should just like what you like, but that's a good way of putting it. It wasn't the best Christmas movie, it wasn't the best Christmas Carol, but it was a fun take on it, and I really enjoyed it. So, what was it about Abby that you thought would be a good one for me to watch?
This one makes some interesting choices, in my opinion, and I thought it had a nice heart to it. And I hadn't seen it until last year when we were doing we did a ranking over at Hallmark's podcast of all different female Scrooge versions. So I watched it there, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And so I thought that it would be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah, this one is basically, of the three, this one is like the most Christmas Carol. This is like basically a straight up gender swapped Christmas Carol. The others
Yeah.
are more like they take inspiration from a Christmas
Yeah.
Carol. This is like they're trying to do a Christmas Carol, but in modern day with a female Scrooge.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this was one of the earlier female Christmas Carol stories. I like some of the choices that they make I mean, some parts of it are dated, but particularly the things involving her sister. I thought that was well done. It gives a kind of an interesting motivation why she becomes the person that she's become. And I thought that was pretty well done. I don't know. What did you think of it?
This one is probably, of the three, I don't know, it might be my second favorite. It's
Okay.
not my least favorite, definitely, but I can't decide which of them is my favorite. I think this is up there, but I think it does suffer a little bit from being dated, but that's also not necessarily a bad thing, because I mean, it sort of reminded me of a cross between a soap opera and Touched by an Angel.
Yeah, I can see that.
Just the feel of it was very Touched by an Angel without angels. It was the ghosts instead of angels.
Well, and then you have just like little things like she sees herself as a kid just loving the Dobson windows and the displays, and which she had just canceled earlier in the story. So there's a lot of kind of callbacks. And I liked little moments like when he says, "You'll have to take these meetings, 3 appointments." And he's like, "Can't I take them all at once and set up a conference call?" that was a funny line, I thought. And the different past, present, and future are all people that she interacts with in the course of the day earlier. So like past are these ladies from the department store, the perfume girls, and they're pretty perky and kind of fun. And it definitely gets very soap opera with the boyfriend, but I think that's often pretty much, I feel like every female version of Christmas Carol, really in general, I think the oh my gosh, Belle. I think the Belle storyline is a little bit hard to kind of, it's pretty cheesy. It's pretty melodramatic. It's all kind of broken up by the fact that her sister has this miscarriage, and
well, it wasn't a miscarriage. She died in childbirth, didn't she?
Yeah. She gets toxemia,
'Cause
and
the baby survives.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I wrote it down wrong, but she thinks it's her fault for going to this party, and so she blames herself for the death of Fran. And that's kind of different. Usually it's just kind of a side note that, oh, the sister died in childbirth, but here they kind of try to make it sort of part of her downward spiral.
It
And
reminded me sort of the 1951 version in that way. Because wasn't that the one that we watched where they added a lot to that backstory?
Yeah,
him and his sister.
They do add a lot to the backstory, and also it is kind of similar in the sense that you have Jake, the Marley character, and you kind of see the backstory of them buying Dobsons, and them making like the shrewd business deals. You kind of see that back story like you did in 1951, and then you see this guy Paul and saying, "You always pick the job over me," and
was the name Dobson supposed to be a reference to something? Because it sounded familiar, but I didn't know if it was supposed to mean something or if that's what they decided to call the store.
I think it was just what they decided to call the store, because in this case, instead of Fezziwig, it's Dobson, and she basically kind of screws over the Fezziwig character Dobson, and ends up buying the store out from under him, being kind of dishonest about it. And this guy Jake, when he dies, she's very like callous, like, she's got it all. They got it all now. They got this other guy out of the way. There were too many people involved. So all of that is, I don't know. It is a little melodramatic, but I still liked it. I thought it was interesting choices. And
I noticed a lot of things. Like I said, this is like pretty much the one that's the most straight up remake or reimagining of it. But it seemed like they were trying to use a lot of the lines, but kind of updating them to a modern vernacular.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it was
a little
cheesy.
Yeah.
One of the better ones I thought was when she says, "There's too many people in the world anyway."
Right. And then the president says, "Well, didn't you say there were too many people? Isn't that what you said?" And she's like, "Oh, I didn't mean him." And then it says, "Which ones did you mean?"
Yeah,
which is pretty good. I like that.
So the ghosts, were they supposed to literally be the people who worked at the store? Or were the ghosts taking the form of the people in the store? Was that even explained? I don't know.
That's an interesting question. I guess they're just taking the form because they're not dead. So, yeah, I think they're just taking the form.
Okay. I thought it was kind of funny, though, the Christmas present. She was a pun because she was the present wrapper at the store.
Yeah. It's a little much, but I enjoyed it too. And I thought that as Lorena Gale, and I thought she did a pretty good job
Hmm.
He was fun.
I found it interesting that they actually included ignorance and want in this version,
Yeah.
and instead of having them like hide under Christmas presents robes, they were under wrapping paper.
Right. Yeah, that was good. I liked that too. And I also like the perfume with the perfume girls. It's the perfume that takes them back in time. So they spray, and find out her dad was kind of a beast, that he never wanted kids or cats. He's gonna,
I think there's a lot of versions of this story where they give backstory that the dad is awful.
right.
But this
Yeah.
one seemed like he was probably super abusive.
Right. Yeah, you certainly see that in Diva's Christmas Carol, with her dad and being in foster care and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I'd agree. A lot of them have that element. And you kind of see that Christmas was something that was a light, something that was positive to her. But losing the sister was the final straw for her, and as far as her mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the only one that really, maybe the 51 one also has him cheating Fezziwig, but you don't often see that. I mean, it's not in the book, but it's just sort of, you kind of assume that, of course, he would have done that to get where he was going. But here it's pretty tangible, because you see the Fezziwigs, you see the party, the Dobsons' Christmas party, which is where she was at when the sister dies, and so it makes sense to me what she ends up doing, I think. And then you see in the future, you see that Tiny Tim character, that he dies, and I did like Tiny Tim's song. He sings "Angels We Have Heard on High," and that was nice. I liked that. He's the kid from Home Improvement, I believe.
Oh yeah, I think I read that. He did look kind of familiar, but that wasn't a show that I watched all the time as a kid. So I wasn't familiar enough to recognize him until I read that.
Yeah. And she gets hit by a car, and she doesn't have any visitors. And she says, "I know I can make things better by being better." And I thought she did a pretty good crazy Scrooge. I thought she was, Susan Lee, she's really good for this kind of melodramatic type material to play something soap opera-y. I think she does a good job.
Yeah.
And I liked the lady who played her sister. It's kind of interesting because they have Molly Parker playing Franny, the sister, and the daughter, which is kind of so I think they had some budget.
That's right.
Some budget issues with that one.
Well, it does kind of make sense because she would look like parents, sort of. So just do her hair a little bit different, maybe. I don't know.
Did anything else stand out for you on this one?
A lot of the things that stood out to me were just like weird little things that were funny. Like at the beginning, the guy saying he finds her scary but alluring.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I did have a question on, maybe, I don't know if you would know this or not, but she says that Christmas is the last day before the biggest and busiest retail day of the year. So the day after Christmas is the biggest and busiest retail day of the year. So was this made before Black Friday was a thing? Because Black Friday is the biggest and busiest retail day of the year.
Yeah. So this is made in 1995, and I'm pretty sure Black Friday was a thing then. So I'm not sure what she meant by that. I mean, I think that the 26th is you get the most returns of any day of the year. That's what I remember hearing. But I don't know. That is interesting. Maybe that's what she meant.
I don't know. It just stood out to me. I was like, that the day after Christmas doesn't seem like it would be the biggest, busiest retail day of the year. It's like, what are you buying things for? Unless they're sales to get rid of things.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know.
Another thing that this is probably not meant to be funny, but I found it hilarious, was when she was sitting alone in her apartment, she made a microwave frozen dinner. And the way she was eating it, she was just taking the teeniest, tiniest little bites. It just cracked me up. I don't know why.
Probably because, when you eat anything in a movie, you have to eat it like 5 million times.
That's probably true.
Yeah. But overall, I think it covers most of the basis of the story, and I think it has a nice heart to it. I think this story really works when you can see sort of when it's more than just about greed, when it's about there's other reasons why the Scrooge character has turned away and isolated themselves from the world. And I think that that helps. Plus, I think it has funny moments, like you were saying about Christmas Present. So I like it. I think it's a pretty decent one.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I'm gonna say it's probably my second favorite because I think I liked It's Christmas Carol a bit better than this one.
Mm-hmm. Well, should we talk about that one then?
No, we should talk about Every Day is Christmas next. That one
Okay.
was my least favorite.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I liked it.
Okay.
So the thing that worked for me in this movie, I admit that Toni Braxton is not the greatest actress in the world. And I also admit that the romance didn't really work that well. But I thought so the idea of having her parents who died in this horrible car accident and it had really traumatized her, and she hadn't really been able to kind of move on beyond that. And every time she saw her mother, I thought that it was just really devastating and it really worked for me. And I mean, I can imagine if I saw, my grandma's just passed this year. If I saw either, and it wasn't even like a traumatic, wasn't even trauma thing, but I don't know. I just thought that really worked. Every time it was just like just her expression, just she was caving in inside every time she saw them. And I thought also because I think that even if I had literally just seen them, like 10 minutes before, when I saw them again, it would still just completely devastate me because you miss them so much. And that sense of missing her parents, I thought was really palatable, and they did a really good job with that. And I thought that that was an interesting approach to take to the movie of making it really about her grief and how that had sort of stalled her in her life, and how going through this experience kind of allowed her to sort of heal and be ready to kind of live a full life again. And I liked Gloria Rubin quite a bit as her mom. I thought she did a good job, and that was what really worked for me about it, was this element of her seeing her mom and just that how much she missed her mom. And I think about my grandpa who passed away in 2001, and I still to this day struggle to talk about him without crying because I missed him so much. And that's not even, that wasn't a traumatic death like this case, and it's been so long, but I don't know, I just miss him so much. And that's what I liked about the movie. I really thought it got that heart right. And so it was interesting, an interesting take on it.
Well, I didn't think that the family stuff, that wasn't what I didn't like about this one. The family stuff was all good.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of things that kept standing out to me. Like the office workers. They all seemed to have very cheesy dialogue, and their acting was not the greatest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, it ranged from like decent to straight up cringy at times.
Yeah.
And the dialogue in the office, I don't really understand what they were talking about, but it seemed like even the writers didn't know what they were talking about. Like, all the stuff they were talking about felt like really generic office talk. Like they were like one step away from going numbers, spreadsheets,
Yeah. I mean, I
stuff like
guess
that.
for me, that's a pretty small part of the movie. I feel like the movie is mostly this romance, which I didn't love, and all this stuff with her and her mother. So I was willing to forgive that because I felt like it's pretty minimal, but I don't disagree. It's not the best as far as that part.
The one other big thing that was through the entire movie that kind of, I don't want to say it bothered me, but it just stood out a little too much was the music. It seemed too playful and or silly when it needed to be more dramatic. like especially with like meeting her parents and things.
Mm-hmm.
It 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 didn't do the movie any favors when it made things seem like they were trying to be funny when they should have been going for dramatic.
I can see that. Yeah, that's true. That's a fair critique. Yeah, that's often a problem with these TV movies is that
Hmm.
a lot of times the music is too loud, and I didn't really feel like this was too loud, but that can be a problem with a lot of them. And then, yeah, it can be just too precocious, and can even in a movie that is precocious, it can be a little annoying to have the music telling you to feel precocious, like it could just be a little much. And so that's probably something, to be honest, that I've gotten a little accustomed to because I watch so many of these kind of movies.
Hmm.
But it is a frequent flaw in them is the music. I will agree with that.
Yeah, I kind of wondered because it seemed, I don't know, it just seemed very generic. Like the composer probably wasn't trying very hard. Like
Hmm.
they were trying to hit specific beats and that was about it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It really took me out of it. But the family stuff was good. The romance stuff, I don't know if I bought them as a couple very much.
Yeah.
But like I didn't really understand their dynamic for most of the movie. Partly because I was trying to figure out who was who in terms of like which one is Cratchit, which one is the nephew. Like I was trying to figure out if the driver or Jeff was Cratchit. And then later I was thinking, well, it was the driver the nephew. But then the driver turns out was Belle.
Kind
So,
of, because then there's that other guy that she that from
oh,
her
that's true. There were
past.
two
Yeah, the
Bells.
minister guy. So yeah, there were kind of two bells. And it's the Cratchit one was the Jeff guy that she
Yeah.
at the end she ends up paying off his mortgage and everything. And I mean, at least I guess some of these guys must get overtime or whatever. But I liked the I mean, every time she saw her mother, I thought she did a good job.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of these kind of movies where I feel like the reaction is not a normal reaction. Like they had one this last weekend called Christmas on My Mind, where the lead character has this fall and gets amnesia, and nobody had like everybody was just like very like, oh, okay. I mean, if that happened to anybody that that would be a shocking. You can't remember anything, in the last 2 years. That would be shocking. Like you'd have a shocked
Uh-huh.
response, right? And
Yeah.
nobody did, and it was frustrating. And whereas every time she saw her mom, I felt it. So I guess my appreciation for this movie is pretty simple, and I liked that she obviously just misses her mother so much, and that would be so horrible in your your 20s to have both of your parents die in a car accident out of the
Hmm.
blue. Like that would be so traumatizing. And then if you actually did get to see them again, can you imagine how you'd feel? Like that would be just so overwhelming. And I appreciated that. It seemed like it never got, despite her seeing them repeatedly, I felt like every single time she saw them, she kind of broke down. Like it
Hmm.
never became sort of routine for her. And that was what worked for me about this movie. I thought that was very well done. And I guess I connected to it kind of emotionally that I can't imagine how hard that would be to lose your parents like that, and then to be able to see them.
Hmm.
Um, and they show the whole scene where she's cooking Christmas dinner and everything's all happy, and then she gets that call, and it was kind of lame that the romance guy was there at the hospital for some reason. Like I'm like whatever, but nevertheless, when she gets the word from the priest or whatever that they died and she's in that church, like that was pretty devastating to
Hmm.
me. And then she has to watch it again, and she's kind of saying like, why did I have to go through that again? And like get re-traumatized. Um and I said, and she says, "You have been running so long, you forgot to face your pain, and the only thing you love now is money." And so I thought that was an interesting take on the story, because usually it's about sort of the fear of poverty that makes Scrooge the person that he becomes. But in this case, it's the fear of grief and the fear of pain that turns her into something that she can kind of control, which is work. It's the fear of dealing with that grief that's actually her problem, not money. And I like that. I thought it was a cool take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the stuff with her family, that was all good.
Mm-hmm.
It was just one of those things where there was a bunch of other things happening that kind of turned me
Yeah.
off of it. But I can see why you would like it for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt like most of that other stuff was pretty minimal. Yeah, and then she sees her dad for future, and then that's her reaction to that is pretty emotional. She also sees, I thought the whole thing with her boyfriend was weird, because she has this boyfriend that she dumps at the beginning of the movie, and they're going to go to Bali, and she sees this whole scene of him picking out a wedding ring, and then they have a whole scene at the end where she tells him, "Oh, I'm sorry, but we're really not meant to be," or something. And I was kind of like, why did we need this whole plot line?
Yeah.
It was completely unnecessary. I don't understand why we needed her to have 3 different boyfriends, love interests in the movie, because she then goes and tells the minister friend, ex-boyfriend, that she's sorry. And it was kind of like her 12 steps or something. She had to say sorry to everybody. And then finally she kind of realizes that this guy is the driver is the guy for her. And all that stuff did nothing for me. I was just, I could have done away with it all and have it just be about her and her mom. That was what worked for me. The rest of it was not great.
The scene with her meeting her old fiance, who's now a pastor, that was fine. But the guy that she just broken up with, that one was really unnecessary, and the thing at the beginning was unnecessary, and he was one of the worst actors in the movie, I thought.
Yeah, he wasn't
not quite as bad as some of the ancillary Office people, but like of all the people who have like major dialogue, he was probably the worst.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was pretty bad. So I guess with this, like, there can just be one part that I thought was strong enough that it was worth discussing, and I thought it was a different take that I had seen before. So I think if you're gonna watch this movie, watch it for Gloria Reuben as her mom, and for that whole plot. Yeah. So I guess Christmas Carol is your favorite of this group. It's probably my favorite as well.
Yeah. I think in terms of like being a good adaptation of the source material, Ebby is my favorite.
Yeah.
As far as being a good overall movie, it's Christmas Carol is my favorite.
Yeah. I think that's very fair. Yeah, this is definitely it's Christmas Carol is definitely a very loose adaptation. And the fact that they have Carrie Fisher playing every single ghost is a little bit much. I mean, I love Carrie Fisher, but whatever. She's so great. But yeah, she plays Marley, past, present, and future in the story. But did you like the office workers in this much better?
They were much better. At the very beginning, I was like, okay, this one guy, he's going to annoy me. He seems like a very bad overactor, but mellowed out. He was better by the end.
Yeah.
The 3 that were like scheming behind her back, they were kind of the worst ones, but they didn't annoy me in the same way that
I thought they were so funny. I enjoyed them, like the whole revolution. I thought that was really funny. But Carson Kressley, all this stuff made me laugh.
Yeah, at the beginning I was like, oh no, we're getting into another situation like the other one, but then it turned out it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah. And you know what's really funny is that in Hallmark movies, a lot of times, especially if they're set in the city for some reason, if they want to show that somebody is a bad person, they they will have them ignore a bell ringing Santa. And they do that at the very beginning. This Scrooge character, they totally have her just completely like she's not even
ignoring him. It's like
no,
she's purposely taunting him.
Yeah, she's like, "Ugh, what's wrong with you? Get out of my way." So that was hilarious. I really liked that with Carol.
That's kind of funny. I wouldn't have thought of that as being a trope, but you're the Hallmark expert, so if something's a trope, you'll know it.
Yeah. And of course, any good Hallmark heroine would, of course, give to a bell ringing Santa. That is natural. But yeah, you have this character, Carol, who's a piece of work. She runs this publishing house. It's interesting with this because they kind of have two Cratchit characters in this one, because there's her assistant named Kendra, and then there's this woman named Tanya. And Kendra, what I thought was interesting is Kendra is she's taken on Carol as a mentor. And it's kind of similar to, I don't know if you remember when we talked about the Barbie Christmas Carol, but in the Barbie Christmas Carol, she sees in the future that her understudy or whatever has basically become like her and sort of taken her and and you kind of see that in Kendra, that she ends up kind of becoming, because she doesn't end up going with the boyfriend to Europe or whatever, and she sacrifices all the stuff for Carol, and then she ends up kind of becoming like Carol in the future, which is sort of upsetting for Carol. So there's kind of that plot line, which I liked. And then also you have this Tanya who tries to picture this novel at the beginning, and she gets fired for doing it. So there's sort of that plot line as well. You also have that she doesn't ever visit her mother because she is very resentful. And so there's her mom with Alzheimer's. And there's this nurse.
That was wrong with her mom. I wasn't sure if they said, because I was trying to figure out what was going on with her mom, like why she needed a caretaker.
Like I don't know if they actually say those words, but I feel like it was pretty clear that was the problem, was that it was some kind of Alzheimer's type of thing. So yeah, she's super jerk. And I like the Office Revolt. I think it's just over the top enough to be funny, and they're gonna call it Revolution Publishing. Like Viva Revolution. And there's I bet this had a lot of improvising from Carrie Fisher. She was a really talented writer, and there's a lot of moments in here that I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of came from her. Like I love when when they say when she says bigger doesn't always mean better, and Carol says, "Give me one example." And she's like, tumors, cockroaches, holes in the wall. That was good. I like that. I also like just the touch of whimsy that they have a few times, like when she goes out of she keeps going out of closets, and they're not she's going into closets and they're not real, that this is a fake world kind of a thing. Is sort of funny.
That probably was, it was kind of funny, but that was probably the thing that kind of, I don't know, annoyed me the most about this version, was that she keeps purposely trying to leave Eve. Like she thinks she has some sort of control over the situation. She's like, they've gone to the past, and she's like, well, I'm leaving, and then she just leaves. Like, where did you think you were gonna go?
That's fair. It was kind of funny though. But it's also pretty aware of Christmas Carol, which is always funny. And
I think both this version and Every Day is Christmas talked about A Christmas Carol, mentioning the story, but I think it came up more in this one.
Yeah, and she even says at one point there's some line like, it's not Star Wars after all. There's some line about that, which was funny. And and I don't know, just lines like I like it when Carrie says, You think everyone who works for you is happy? I have to capture this look of total cluelessness. That's good. And so she was fun. I just liked Carrie Fisher in this role.
She was my favorite part about the movie.
For sure.
I don't think the movie would have been the same if somebody else had played this part.
No way. And she says, people like me have been coming down here to help people like you for generations. She says, Chuck was just the first one to write about it. Charles Dickens. So
well, in that, talking about like the story of A Christmas Carol, at one point you see Carol's mom and the nurse watching a version of the Christmas Carol. It's the 1935 version with Seymour Hicks.
Yeah.
Which is such a weird coincidence because that's the version that I'm doing with Sarah this year.
Really?
We'll be recording it probably next week, but that's the version we're talking about.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Seymour Hicks played Scrooge twice. I think he was in that, and then I think he was in a silent movie version as well.
Yeah, because I think we noticed that when we watched it, because we watched this like 3 weeks ago. We still haven't reviewed it.
Yeah,
but we noticed it was the same person.
I like when Carol says, I feel sorry for Scrooge. Scrooge was a smart businessman who was bullied into being a sentimental spendthrift. That was good. And then you see that Carol is influencing Kendra, like I said, to be more like her and to not go away with her boyfriend because she's trying to get a transfer to Paris, I think it is, or someplace like that. I forget. Yeah. But
I'm guessing that her publishing company must have like a branch in London.
Sure,
and
yeah.
She wants to transfer to.
Yeah. And I liked the moment where she's talking about her mom and Carol says all she ever did was work. And then Eve says, but she didn't have a choice. You do. And I thought that was pretty good because our, hard on Scrooge obviously for the way he treats people. But I think what happens with Scrooge is that he, as a young person, he's so fearful of the world and fearful of poverty that he works really, really hard to get the position that he has. And I do like it I think it's in the Mickey's Christmas Carol when he says, you work all your life to get money and then people just want you to give it away. Like that. And it is kind of true. Like if there was any other position that you work hard for, people wouldn't really expect you to just give it away. But it's more because he's just allowed his heart to be cold to the world and cold to Christ and what Christmas really means. And so, that's the case here, is that it's not just that the Scrooge character in this case, that Carol works hard. That's not a problem. It's that she's shut herself off from the joy of the world, and she doesn't have to. Her mother kind of had to because of the situation. Anyway, I like that. I think that's good because I think if you just portray Scrooge as a monster, you miss out on some of the story that it has to teach you. So then she sees in the future, she sees Kendra at her funeral, and
the only person at her funeral.
Yeah, in honor of you, she deemed today as a work day.
That was funny.
Yeah, that's a good line. And she says, I don't want to be alone. I want to change. I don't know how to do it. And then later on, you see that with Kendra, and Kendra says, I thought I wasn't supposed to plan my life around a man. And then she says, you're planning your life with your man. And so then she makes everything right with her mother, with this guy, Ben, which again, the romance is, I don't care about that at all.
Yeah, that was probably the most boring part of the movie.
Yeah. And I think the ending of her making everything right is a little drawn out for me. It's a little long. Of course, she manages to read that book overnight, which is pretty impressive. She tells the other Cratchit lady that she's going to publish this book, give her a raise and everything. So
yeah, I didn't really understand what was so great about the book, because it turned out that the book was by and about her boyfriend, But like, what did he do that was so great and life-changing and inspiring? It really wasn't explained.
Yeah, that's true. It was by her ex, and I don't know, it's just a really compelling read, evidently. I don't know. So
And overall, it's probably not important to the plot, but it's just made a big deal out of it.
I
So
mean,
it's like,
she read it and she was willing to take on Carol, and she liked it so much. So evidently, it's just a great book.
apparently.
This one doesn't have, I don't think, the emotion of Every Day is Christmas, which is what I appreciated about that one. It's more fun. It's more funny. Because Carrie Fisher's the best.
Yeah.
And I think Emmanuelle Weger is a pretty decent actress. I think she does okay. She's not Carrie Fisher, but she's okay, I think.
The only other thing I've ever seen her in is Smallville, because she played Lex Luthor's girlfriend in an arc in like the early seasons. I think it ended with them both trying to like kill each other in various ways. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I watched those, but that's the only thing I've ever seen her in. I've never been sure on how to pronounce her name.
Yeah, she's in a couple different Hallmark movies. She's not like my favorite of Hallmark leading ladies, but I think she's okay. She does okay.
Yeah, she was fine.
Yeah,
she wasn't my favorite in this movie, but that's because nobody could beat Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, that's true. It's really true. I mean, I prefer versions. None of these three are like my favorite versions. We'd already done most of my favorites, or you had done them.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think they all try different things and are entertaining. So for me, I would say I like the fact that Every Day is Christmas is about grief and about this relationship with her mom and seeing her mom again. I just thought that was really good. I like that with Abby. I think it is funny, and it also has that emotion, in anything dealing with her sister. And I just think it's sort of clever, like Ghost of Christmas Presents, and them coming from the store, and makes it a fun watch. And then I also just this is Christmas Carol is just, it's funny, and it gets some of those beats down for Christmas Carol, and it's got Carrie Fisher. So all three I think are worth a watch, and I think are entertaining. None of them are perfect, but
yeah, especially if you're someone like me who's wanting to watch a bunch of different versions of things.
Yeah,
I would say check these out. If you're only going to watch one, I'd say it's Christmas Carol, but I think Abby's worth it too. And Every Day is Christmas depends on who you are. If you're more like Rachel, you'll like it. If you're more like me, you probably won't. But
yeah, fair enough. But I would agree that It's Christmas Carol is the best of these three. Agree.
Especially because I just love Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason I ended up wanting to talk about this is because I started editing what I was going to do for the next episode of the podcast, this episode of the podcast, and I realized I hadn't listened to it in years, but I started editing the Divas part, and you mentioned one with Tori Spelling. I was like, wait a minute, I haven't seen one with Tori Spelling.
Yeah.
So I was like, got to find this one last one. We got to talk about this one too. Make it an even 5.
Yeah. And I like this one. I think it's got some interesting choices and does some interesting things.
Yeah, I ended up liking this one too.
I think that Tori Spelling, she gets kind of a bad rap, but I think she can be pretty funny if she wants to be. She has a decent comic timing about her, and I think that her as this kind of diva character is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen her in a whole lot. The main thing I remember her from is she was one of the villains on a single episode of Smallville one time. And I believe she was some kind of a diva in that show too. Not the same type of diva. I don't remember exactly how it went down. It's been years since I've seen that. I didn't find any issues with her acting in this at all. Anything that was cliche or subpar mostly was from the script. It wasn't from her.
Yeah.
And I thought for the most part the acting in this was really decent.
Yeah. So she's running this talk show,
And it's, very kind of Ricky Lake kind of type of show, real trashy.
Yeah.
And she doesn't care, and she doesn't care about the people who work for her. And in this case, you have, instead of Bob Cratchit, you have a female Cratchit named Roberta.
Was there a Roberta Cratchit in a different version too?
Oh, I'm sure I'm sure.
I seem to remember that, like maybe the Eddie one. It's been a while since I watched that one, but I could swear there was a Roberta that replaced Bob Cratchit.
Yeah, I'd have to watch them again to remember. But in this one, Roberta is buying presents for her niece and nephew, and you have her ex is trying to take the child away, Roberta's child.
Lily.
And she sees that Roberta is spending more than the amount that she gave her to spend for the niece and nephew. And I think she says something like, just get them a rock or something like that. No, I think it's not that she says get them rocks. It's that they bring her rocks. Remember that at the beginning?
The niece and nephew? The one child painted her a rock.
Yeah, painted her a rock. And she's like, why'd you give me this? Which I love.
Roberta's daughter is the Tiny Tim character, but did they mention any sort of ailment? Because usually the Tiny Tim character has some kind of an ailment, and I didn't notice that there was anything wrong with her. Was she just a normal kid?
I think she's just a normal kid, but the ex is trying to take her away. I think that's sort of the main struggle.
Oh, you're right, because at the end, in the funeral scene, they talk about she hardly sees her daughter anymore because the ex got custody.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I like in this version is I like the take on Jacob Marley.
Mm-hmm.
They have Aunt Marla.
It took me a second to realize, oh yeah, that's Aunt Marla, Jacob Marley.
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Yeah, it was good.
There was a few things like that, like the Roberta instead of Robert. And that was one thing that I liked, and at the same time I thought it was kind of weird, because you had all these like one-to-one obvious comparisons with the Christmas Carol story. Like even the spirits were the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. But then you have the actual book in the story, because they're reading A Christmas Carol. So A Christmas Carol exists. So in the universe of A Carol Christmas, is A Christmas Carol historic? Like, is it a history or is it historical fiction? Are these ghosts something that everybody knows exists? Or is it just random that the story happens to feature these characters and then they come and visit her?
I think it's just random. I think it's because doesn't she say something like, you're going to try to pull this Scrooge thing on me? Or, she makes some comment. There's like a meta reference about it.
Yeah, I feel like there was a couple of meta references to the story beyond just reading it.
But the thing that Aunt Marla reminds me of, and this will go back to I think our first Christmas in July we ever recorded, is I actually think this is similar to the plot what they do for the Barbie Christmas Carol. Because in that one, they also have her aunt, who's this kind of the stage.
You're
in that
right.
case, it's an opera singer that won't let her go out and makes her practice. And here, I think it works as well. I like it. And here, Marla is coming to her and saying, everything I told you was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All the advice I gave you was bad. And we find out that Marla, I just think it's kind of funny that her sort of stage mom-ishness went to the point where she threw a fit the fact that she was a wise man and not playing Mary in the
I didn't even realize that's what she was upset at first, because she looked in the little dish that she had. She was like, myrrh? They couldn't even give you gold?
That's right.
That cracked me up. That's so
like, you've got to be Mary. Yeah. And we also find out that Marla scares off the past love, John Joyce.
Stand in for Belle.
Who I thought was a real putz. But I feel like that character is really hard to do because he's kind of perfect, like without flaws.
Yeah, you're kind of right.
I feel like he's usually a putz. the Belle type character.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty lame.
I did like the choice to have the Belle character be interested in charity, which is kind of the opposite of Scrooge.
I mean, he's like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a saint,
yeah,
working in a soup kitchen and everything. But Marla says, you got to always keep them waiting. And I don't know how effective that philosophy would be in show business.
Yeah.
Like, I think, unless you're Oprah Winfrey or someone like really famous, then I think you need to be on time where you need to be. Don't leave them waiting.
Even then, if you keep treating people badly by even just keeping them waiting,
yeah,
I don't see how that gains you respect, because that was her point, was like, they'll respect you if you keep them waiting. And I'm like,
yeah,
if somebody's purposely not coming, if they're like a chronically late person, it's kind of annoying, and I get it, but to the point where they're doing it on purpose, that I would not respect that at all.
Yeah, exactly. And we find out that she is making deals behind the scene about her show, turning it into this trashy show.
Well, they like specifically called it a freak show at one point. It's like Ricky Lake or Maury, but like worse.
Yeah, it's like kind of Jerry Springer. So yeah, I think that all works pretty well. I do. And I think that Tori is snarky enough to be funny. And
I think she pulled off both sides of the character well, because at the beginning there was nothing likable about her. I hated her, and I fully believed that she was an irredeemable, awful person.
Yeah.
But by the end, I liked her. I was actually on her side. So I think she pulled that off really well.
That's the whole journey of Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And obviously this is 2003 made for TV movie. So like, as far as production and everything, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But
it's one of those things where like, you kind of know what you're getting into. It's a TV movie. So like, don't expect great cinema. And I think, I had a good time watching it. I ended up really liking it. So
yeah, I know. I think it's not like you're making excuses, but you're just accepting for something for what it is, and not expecting feature film budget. But yeah, the ghost, we kind of skipped over. The Ghost of Christmas Past is Gary Coleman. And they make a few kind of little jokes about him, but I think he's perfectly fine in this role. He does a good job.
The thing that I liked, I don't know if I liked it the most about his character, but I liked that they made it a point to keep them, if not eye level, like similar heights, even though he's, of course, quite short. But I like that they actually called it out at one point, because they're looking in the window of the trailer and like he's rising up to be at her height. And I was like, that's great. I really liked that.
Yeah.
Because like when they were sitting on the bench, he was sitting on the back of the bench so that they could still talk face to face. It's little things like that they didn't necessarily point out that I noticed and I appreciated. But I really liked the one part where he's like physically rising up to be at eye level with her.
Yeah, that was good. And then for present, we have William Shatner. And he has a pretty big name, I feel like, for this kind of movie at the time and everything. And I think he was on Boston Legal right around this time. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. He only speaks some cliches. That was funny.
He also, I didn't really understand why he had a sneezing problem. Like, was there a point to that?
I don't know. This is when we see the ex trying to take the child from Roberta. And then we see Roberta getting the presents for her niece and nephew. Then she sees John at the soup kitchen being a perfect human. And I
don't know why, but it strikes me as really funny that he's the one you're picking on in this movie.
Yeah. He's a putz. What can you say?
I totally see that now, but I didn't even think about it when I was watching. I was like, yeah, he's a good guy, but now I see, yeah, he really was kind of too perfect, wasn't he?
Yeah. And then how random is it that they got James Cromwell to be future in this weird TV movie.
Yeah, no, that was very random.
Oscar nominated.
And he didn't even say anything. He was just there staring. Which, I mean, it was effective. He was good in the part. Just kind of random to see him
he's like,
show up in this TV movie.
Yeah, he's like, who will pay my day? Who will pay my rate? I need a gig right now, this minute. And his people were like, okay, here you go. Be in the Tori Spelling movie. What? I would love to know the backstory behind that. It's really random. He's a limo driver.
He takes her to the future and she sees that her show has become a disaster.
Yeah. That Christmas is the show to tell their families how much they hate them.
Which is kind of terrible, but hilarious.
Yeah, hilarious. I could have used more crazy Scrooge. What's what I call when Scrooge gets awoken and is redeemed and kind of is sort of mad for a little bit, yelling out at the little boy and getting the turkey and all that stuff. And I love crazy Scrooge. And I could have used more of that with Carol because I think Tori would have been hilarious.
Yeah, I feel like they did crazy, but in sort of a more downplayed way because most of her craziness was saved for Roberta because, like, she gives Roberta a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
She triples her salary, gives her a house, gives her her entire wallet so that she can go shopping, and she gives her a lawyer so she can keep her kid. It's like she went all out for Roberta. Technically, she sort of did too because she gives the entire staff a trip to Hawaii as well, which is crazy in its own way, but it works.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you look at the pieces of this with Shatner, Coleman, Tori Spelling, with all this stuff, and you think, oh, this is going to be really nutso. But really, I mean, it's pretty straightforward interpretation of Christmas Carol.
It really was. I was not expecting much out of this version.
Yeah.
I did not expect to like it like I did. I expected it to be really cheesy and badly acted, but it wasn't. Right. So I think the fact that I had such low expectations really helped.
Yeah.
But I actually ended up really enjoying it. So
yeah, it's a good one. It's one I enjoy, and I think it could have even been more wacky. Like that, I think that like Diva's Christmas Carol has a little bit more creativity as far as, like I love the fact that they do the behind the music as the future. I think that's so clever. Yeah. And some of the other choices it makes are pretty clever. But I might even say it's a little underrated. It's a fun version. It really is. And I think that most people would look at it and be like, oh, Tori Spelling.
The title doesn't help anything either.
I wouldn't even give it a shot. And then they actually watch it and they're like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah. No, I don't think I would have ever watched it if I weren't doing this podcast episode, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's fun to watch, especially I think in July. It's kind of fun to get to the Christmas spirit.
Well, since we've done 5 of these, I think we should like rank them as like worst to best.
Okay.
Or least favorite to most favorite if you like them all.
Let's do it.
What do you think is your least favorite?
I think my least favorite is Every Day is Christmas, but I still value it. I still think it was an interesting take and making it about her grief that has kind of immobilized her as opposed to her greed. And the fact that the ghost was her mother and father. I don't know. I connected emotionally with that part of the take. But the romance part did not work at all. I didn't like that at all. And I'm not saying that Toni Braxton is the best actress in the world, but I will defend it on that level of, I think that was an interesting take to kind of make it about grief, kind of immobilizing her as opposed to money. That's the typical kind of thing that sort of freezes Scrooge. And I liked that. I thought it was interesting.
I think that Every Day is Christmas is probably my least favorite as well. I think you probably liked it more than I did. I didn't dislike it per se, but it didn't really connect with me in most ways that I think it connected with you. I liked some of the choices they made. I thought there were some creative things that they did with the story, but overall it was kind of forgettable for me. So that's why it's at the bottom of my list.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair.
So what's your next one?
So my next one is probably Ebby, I think, is my next one.
That's my next one too.
Yeah.
I wonder how similar our lists are going to be.
And I'd have to rewatch it because it has been a while since I watched it. And I definitely, I mean, I think they have some interesting motivation with her feeling like she abandoned her sister when, you know, her sister dies in childbirth and she was at a party, and, you know, so they try to kind of expand that. And there's some fun moments. The fact that everybody that's in the store ends up being the spirits is fun. I enjoy that. It's perfectly enjoyable, but I don't know. It's tough to rank.
Yeah, I think the reason it's lower on my list is because I found it more forgettable than the others.
Yeah.
Because even though they did a really good job of making it, I guess, more like A Christmas Carol, like they found like one-to-one comparisons for most of the characters, and it was basically the story of A Christmas Carol, just gender swapped and modern day.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job in that respect, but overall it was kind of forgettable. So that's why it's lower on my list.
Yeah, I think so. So next one is a tough one for me, but I went with A Carol Christmas.
Okay. Our lists have diverged.
Oh, have they? Yeah, I pretty much a tie between my 3 and 2. I like them for different reasons. But yeah, I mean, I like we've talked about already. I think it's a pretty fun version. I think that they, you know, they got Shatner in there, they got Coleman in there, they got Tori having fun, and overall, it's perfectly enjoyable version of Christmas Carol.
Yeah, for me, the top 3 were really hard because each one has things that I did really like about it.
Yeah.
But I ended up sticking It's Christmas Carol right in the middle because even though I remember I enjoyed it while I was watching it, and of course I love Carrie Fisher, a lot of the rest of the movie I don't remember much of. So I feel like if I've forgotten a bunch of it except for the one character that I know I really liked, probably shouldn't go higher on my list.
Well, I mean, I was debating as well because it is so, it is a time, it is, I was debating because it is kind of lazy. I do think, I mean, I think they could have, as much as we all love Carrie Fisher, I think we could have had a ghost or two. We could have had Jacob Marley, you know, like for her to be everything.
Yeah.
But I do love Carson Kressley and the group of employees that are starting Revolution Publishing, and I don't know. I think that whole thing is funny. Revolution and I do think there's some pretty funny lines in there. I think a lot of it was probably improv from Carrie Fisher, and so that's why I was having the debate: is do I pick the one that I think is more accurate to the story, a better Christmas Carol version, or do I pick the one that is maybe a little bit funnier, a little bit? Then I don't know. So it's tough. Maybe I could call this a tie.
So that was your number 2.
Yeah, my second. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we probably just swapped those around because I was debating on whether to pick A Carol Christmas too, but I think I ended up sticking it in the number 2 spot, even though like right now I felt like it should be really high, but that happens to me with a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I just watched something, I really liked it, and for like a week, it's like my favorite. And then I go on, I realize it's flaws, and then it goes down on my list. Like when I watch Jurassic World, I was like, this is the best Jurassic Park movie I've ever seen.
Oh, no!
I gave it a while. I was like, yeah, no, the first one is the best one.
Yeah. Oh, good. Came to your senses.
It's just, I have like a post-movie high that I'm on. So I think I've still got that for A Carol Christmas.
I think we all we all can do that sometimes. I think that's a good thing. You should let the movie win you over. We shouldn't be too cynical these days. So we have the same number one.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, Diva's Christmas Carol. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's really creative. It's really funny. It's emotional. It goes some pretty dark places in her past. It really does a good job of giving Scrooge character motivations. You understand why she's doing what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And why, her fear from her father, and why she did what she did. And I think that the Bob Cratchit guy, her manager guy, isn't my favorite. He's kind of a putz. but other than that, I think it's pretty good.
It's definitely not a perfect movie, but I really liked it. Yeah. And the fact that I remember most of it, even like 3 years now later from seeing it, and I've gone back to it and watched parts of it again, I feel like that says something, because like the others, I haven't really thought about too much since then. But like A Diva's Christmas Carol has stuck into my head as one of the most creative takes on the story.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, oh yeah, it would be definitely, without a doubt, my top 10 Christmas carols, like including feature films and everything, for sure.
One day, once I've watched more versions, I should make a top 10 list and see if it ends up in there. I bet it would be now, but I don't think I've seen that many yet. I know you did your whole list years ago.
Way back.
You've seen more than I have.
Yeah.
But it would be on my list right now.
Yeah, and Vanessa Williams is just like perfect casting.
Yes. Oh, I loved her.
Absolutely perfect in the role, and good music too to boot.
Yeah.
Very good. We did it.
Yeah.
We ranked the Christmas Carol.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this with me. I know it was sort of last minute, but I really wanted to get this one in.
Yeah, it's fun.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews all over social media and on iTunes and YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check that out. And you can find me at the Hallmark-esque podcast, where we review all things Christmas all year round.
Including stuff like this. Okay, well, thanks for joining me. We will see you for another episode sometime in the future.
Yeah. Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas! Thanks to Rachel for joining me for this episode of Every Version Ever. If you want more from her, make sure to check out her links in the description below, but also make sure to check out my other podcast, because Rachel joined me for 2 episodes of I Heart Movies as well. She and her Hallmark-esque co-host Cammie brought me 2 different Hallmark films to talk about, and then Rachel and I talked about another Christmas movie she's been hyping up for a while, another Hallmark-esque holiday rom-com called Christmas Perfection. Next time we're actually doing another 5-film podcast, but this is one I've actually been planning from the beginning of the podcast. My cousin Sarah is joining me, and we're going to be talking about all the different silent film versions of A Christmas Carol. It's always so much fun to talk about these historical films with Sarah, so make sure to come back next time for the finale of Christmas in July on Every Version Ever. Thanks for listening.